was carved out of Roman marble. You know, it was just this monolithic kind of thing. And we took just the opposite, which was, let's make Steve very high profile. Let's tell our story.
Working in this garage, Jobs and a high school classmate quit their positions at large electronic companies and, using tiny silicon chips, built this small computer board.
Funny, the garage story was less of a feature in those early days. Later on, became more of a look back. People started to lay stories on the background and so forth. You know, I told Steve this, and most of my clients, in fact, there's a song in Fiddler on the Roof that Tevye sings. He says, if I were a rich man, and he said, I'd sit in the temple and I'd lecture to the wise men all day long. And it wouldn't matter if you're right or wrong. When you're rich, they think you know. So in a technology business, you have to show that you are successful in order to have a platform.
It led to a $250 million business and the most popular typewriter-sized computer on the market today.
Steve Jobs, I realize this is your baby and you've made a career out of it, but you're also something of a philosopher. Do you see the inherent possibility of bad coming out of all of this?
Well, I think one of the things you really have to look at is you have to go watch the kids using these things. And what you find is far from something quite harmful. In effect, what you see is an instantaneous reflection of a part of themselves, the creative part of themselves being expressed.
He was going for a computer that really felt like an extension of himself. That's what people wanted, and I think he sensed that, he knew that. My first book on the computer culture was called The Second Self, and the key quote that gave me the title was, when you think of a computer, put a little piece of your mind into the computer's mind, and you come to think of yourself differently.
Our whole company, our whole philosophical base is found on one principle. And that one principle is that there's something very special and very historically different that takes place when you have one computer and one person. Did you have an opportunity to meet Jobs?
Yes, I met him on several occasions.
And did you sense from talking to him that he did understand what he was doing?
I think he understood what he was doing. He knew he had created something intimate and that could be sold as something intimate.
You for you.
It wasn't just for you. It was you.
You just show me the front of it so that's the part that most people, this is the people that everybody remembers from the ads, from the Time magazine cover with Steve holding his lap. And this is the famous beige that we're never going to have any more of. He hated this even at this time, but we were kind of stuck with it by the time we got there. It was a fun little machine. He called me just out of the blue. I was working at Xerox, and I picked up the phone, and it was Steve Jobs. And he said, I hear you're a good guy, but everything you've done so far is crap. Come work for me. I told my wife at the time, I said, well, what could happen? How bad could this be? I didn't realize how bad it could be. First trip Steve ever made to Japan was to see what we could do about getting a disk drive for the machine. And we saw the Sony disk facility in Atsugi, Japan. He had a lot of affection for Sony because the Walkman was a machine that he just thought was the bee's knees.
You really feel the music with the Sony Walkman. The Sony Walkman is a tiny stereo cassette player with truly incredible sound.
I think it was the first product in human history that went over 1 billion units. That he liked. One of the things that Steve thought was important and Jerry Manning facilitated was, this is where all the signatures are. There are all the people original group that actually signed the machine. There's Steve Jobs, right in the middle. My name is over here.
Why did you do that?
Because the people that worked on it consider themselves, and I certainly consider them artists. These are the people that under different circumstances would be painters and poets, but because of the time that we live in, this new medium has appeared in which to express oneself to one's fellow species, and that's a medium of computing.
We would sit in the temples in Kyoto, just taking off our shoes at the door and sitting.
Did you take from that any kind of aesthetic vision, do you think?
I think certainly. Simplicity. Just feeling that inner calm is so available in places, at some places in Japan. He was very much a person who was comfortable in silence. Steve ruled by a kind of a chaos, and it's easy to make chaos. And if you're comfortable with it, you can use it as a tool. And he used a vast number of really irritating tools to get other people involved in his schemes. He's seducing you, he's vilifying you, and he's ignoring you. You're in one of those three states.
When you get a core group of 10 great people, it becomes self-policing as to who they let into that group. So I consider the most important job of someone like myself is recruiting.
Steve Jobs brought us all together in a place that had no rules. He's a maniac. He's a maniacal genius. His job is to stir up everything.
Most places in life are continuously telling you that your dreams aren't possible or practical. You don't want to hear that when you're under 30. What you want to do is race after them. If you ask yourself, why are you doing it? I'm certainly not doing it for Steve Jobs. I'm doing it for something that I think is much greater good than that.
Everybody just wanted to work, not because it was work that had to be done, but it was because something that we really believed in.
Here is how we see personal computers. Here's how we want the world to be, and here's how we're gonna change. We have a vision of how we want it to be. We want to convert people. We want to make converts.
I felt my job was at Macintosh was to make the division work smoothly enough that we could actually get this thing from really a mess of kids playing around with a bunch of hardware and software into something that would be a commercial product. That's what I did. I got the machine finished.
It is now 1980.
IBM became the apparent visible threat.
IBM wants it all and is aiming its guns on its last obstacle to industry control, Apple. Will Big Blue dominate the entire computer industry, the entire information age? Was George Orwell right?
And it was again the juxtaposition with IBM. Yeah.
People in the audience were the mindless side here.
Yes. For Steve it was great because he had this bad guy, good guy, and he loved playing that role.
On January 24th, Apple Company will introduce Macintosh, and you'll see why 1984 wouldn't be like 1984. Looking back behind the scenes, it's easy to see the irony in the end. Today, Apple is Goliath. But even in 1984, when Apple cast itself as the counterculture company, working at Apple was a lot tougher than IBM.
I think if you talk to a lot of people on the Mac team,
they will tell you it was the hardest they've ever worked in their life. Some of them will tell you it was the happiest they've ever been in their life. But I think all of them will tell you that it is certainly one of the most intense and cherished experiences they will ever have.
Yeah,
So, it's some of those things you are not sustainable for some people.
I ended up changing my entire life. I lost my wife in that process. I lost my children in that process. I lost the whole structure of